Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition. Yes, that's right, 7th edition. I'm not talking about 5th edition, which is out now. I'm not talking about 6th edition, which is going to come out after the current edition. I'm talking about 7th Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition, the one that's going to come out after 6th edition, right? Okay. All right. Now, first of all, let's talk about the obvious. Why on earth would I talk about this, right? Well, there's a good reason. So the reason I want to talk about this is I try to cover the stuff on my channel that isn't covered about Dungeons & Dragons. You can find information anywhere about how to be a better dungeon master, how to be a better player, what new book came out, blah, 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 right? And that stuff is useful, and I'm glad there are people doing it. But there's enough of people doing it, and I like to talk about the corners of Dungeons & Dragons that don't get a lot of play, don't get a lot of love, when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons commentary, Dungeons & Dragons coverage on YouTube, right? So that's why I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition. All right, so let me put the stakes in the ground here before we talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Before we talk about Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, we already talk about Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition. We got to say what's going to happen in Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. So I'm going to lay it out for you, okay? All right, here's my take on what's going to happen for 6th edition, okay? Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition will be announced at Origins. This is all my predictions, okay? Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition will be announced. They won't call it 6th edition, by the way. They'll have some nonsense name for it. Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition will be announced specifically at Origins in 2022, okay? It will take 2 years to build. The person who will build it is going to be Kate Welch. She is going to be the lead design on 6th edition. She will spend 2 years building it. Some of these people may be involved in the build, and once it's built, it's going to run for 9 years. I think 6th edition will last for 9 years. It will be around between 2024, and it will survive all the way up until 2033. And Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition will start in 2033. But before we get to 7th edition, though, let's go all the way with Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. All right. The team, in my opinion, that Kate Welch will build to do Dungeons & Dragons is going to be, she's going to do, I think she'll bring in Adam Cobell of Dungeon World. I think she's going to bring in John Harper from, where's she going to bring in John Harper from? Oh, yeah. John Harper from Blades in the Dark. Amazing game. She may bring in Luke Crane, right? I think that's possible. And then she's also going to bring in 3 other people. Oh, she'll bring in Satine Phoenix, without a doubt. And then she's going to bring in... she may bring in Ann Creeder of The Watch. And I think she will bring in Shauna Germain. There's your team. Boom. Done. Right? That's Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. Locked and loaded. Finished. Right? And it'll last for 9 years. All right. There you go. 6th edition finished. Done. That's all my predictions. Let's talk about Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition. All right? So specifically, I want to talk about just one element today for Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition that I think will be in that game. A very, very distinct 7th edition additive, right? And that will be air characters. Air characters? What the heck's that? Well, right now, there's a dungeon master, and there are player characters, okay? I think in 2033, right now, we have a really unusual circumstance happening in society. I came from a bygone era, right? I got engaged when I was 19 years old, and I was married when I was 22, right? The millennials I'm playing with today, many of them are 25. I get that, yeah. So the millennials I'm playing today, marriage isn't even on their map, right? Not even close, right? And more. So one of the things that's really unusual, and I think this is why we're talking about air characters today, okay? Is we have this really unusual structure for love. So in American culture specifically, Okay, and everything I'm talking about today is American specific. I'm talking about Dungeons and Dragons, how it plays out in American culture. Absolutely, Dungeons and Dragons impacts other countries, but I don't live in other countries, so I'm not really speaking to that, right? So that's why I'm speaking about the American culture and how Dungeons and Dragons impacts American culture, okay? And how American culture impacts Dungeons and Dragons players. So we have this really fascinating thing that happened where millennials and Gen Zs, Zoomers, millennials and Zoomers, they have this really fascinating thing where they live in this world where all the pot for adult, now Zoomers aren't adults yet. Like, I'm talking about when Zoomers become adults, not now, right? But for millennials, they are of dating age, right? So this is all for people who are, let's just keep it on millennials. That's simpler. For millennials, they, and I promise you this relates to Dungeons & Dragons. So for millennials, they live in this world where every possibility for two consenting, I'm not even going to use the word two because that ain't appropriate. Every possibility for consenting adults exists, right? So they, gender is no longer in the mix, preference is no longer in the mix, and plurality is no longer in the mix. Do you want to have a relationship with this gender? Do you want to have a relationship with the person with this preference? Totally cool. Do you want to have a relationship with 7 people with that preference, and 2 people with this preference, and 3 people with that preference, or 3 people with that preference, and 1 person with this gender? Like, you can mix and match however you want, right? So they have more freedom, right? And they have more options than any other generation in history, period. But the complexity is so high that as I'm experiencing it, the vast majority of them consider the complexity so high that they're just stepping back and they're going with the A, the big A, right? There's one of the preferences is the big A, right? None of the above. I'm not going down that road. Nothing for me, right? You can keep it all, right? And so you're having that on the love area, and then increasingly, if you look at the board game world, one of the hottest growing trends right now is solo play. And it's even starting to show up in TTRPGs. Ironsworn is having a moment right now specifically with solo play. Solo play is really big, right? So what is an heir character? An heir character is, I think, what is going to be a really critical, central aspect of 7th edition, right? So there's going to be tons of dungeon masters. What if they can't find players? That's one of the biggest problems that dungeon masters have today. It ain't going to be a problem in 2033. So heir characters will be non-human players. There you go, right? People are going to call them AIs. I don't think we're going to have AI in 2033. We'll have machine-learned apps, which masquerade as AI, and people will call them AI, so let's just say AI, but it's not AI, right? So they'll be run by AI. They may also be run by anonymous people, right? But it's not going to be just somebody like Skyping in. That's different, right? Or it could be a hybrid of, or it could be an aggregate. So an air player could be decisions made by an AI, decisions made by a crowd, decisions made by one specific anonymous person who's never revealed, right? Or it could be a hybrid of those, right? And so I think and you could be a dungeon master and have an entire table, a physical table, filled with air characters, right? By then, you'll just represent them by holograms, and I really think that this is going to be a huge portion of Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition, air characters, right? So that is my take on what is going to be in Dungeons & Dragons 7th edition, air characters. And also within this video, I did the setup for what Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition will look like, okay? And I really want to thank you for letting me take the time to share this with you here. I'd love to hear your opinion on air characters. Would you like to play with air characters? Would you use them today if they were possible? I'm really curious. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.